Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the BaileyWiki channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. If you're a DM who likes to wow your players, and you're using platforms like Foundry Virtual Tabletop and Wonderdraft, then you're in the right place. We've recently been playing around with a lot of really cool new modules and features in FoundryVTT that make creating continental and regional maps an absolute breeze. Regional and continental maps are amazing tools for world building in your games, but sometimes they can be harder to assemble in Foundry than, say, a battle map, where they might require knowledge of another piece of software that you haven't used before. To that end, we wanted to share all of these techniques with you and get your thoughts. Some of these are more effort than others, and some give really amazing results for really minimal effort. So we wanted to showcase all of these and see which ones you guys think make the most sense to implement, what you'd like to see more of, and what we should start incorporating in our own modules. Since we're covering several different modules and techniques, check out the timestamps and hop around to the different subjects that interest you and let us know your thoughts on all of the ones that pique your curiosity. With that said, let's dive right in and get to map making. When it comes to creating a regional or world map in Foundry, we of course have to have artwork for it. And there's three main options that we think of with this. The first is creating your own map in Wonderdraft like I've done here. You can of course also use a map from whatever campaign or setting that you're using. For example, this is just a close-up of Neverwinter along the Sword Coast. You can also grab your favorite maps from online at a variety of different sources. One really great place to find maps made by other DMs is if you go to the Tabletop RPGs subreddit. In their wiki, they've got a whole lot of different resources, but what we're interested in is the community and the related subreddits. And there you can find all kinds of other subreddits. This is a great place to go to just for general role-playing things, but specifically for maps, there is a section dedicated to that. And you can see there's all kinds of things in here. So the one I would most recommend taking a look at is something like Wonderdraft or maybe Fantasy Cities. These others have a lot of battle maps specifically. So if we go to our Wonderdraft, here on r/Wonderdraft, you can see that there are a variety of different maps. And if you're going to randomize this or you're going to customize it in Foundry, you want something that's fairly devoid of labels or extra symbols. And so this is a great candidate right here from user TOA Theron. Go ahead and we can take a look at this, and this is a great map that you can go ahead and save the image onto your local machine and then put onto your Foundry instance, and then we can use that down the line in another step. No matter what we've chosen for our base artwork, there's a few different ways we can start to build out the features of our world map, and probably the most basic of them all is to have journal notes. If I go to my journal notes here, you can see that I have added pins for all of these different settlements and cities throughout the world. Now, if I had this toggle notes display turned on, then I would be able to see this all the time. In this case, it's a little cluttered to have that on all of the time, so I actually prefer having it off. There's a couple modules that we'll link down in the description that have options for enforcing one setting or another on your players so that they know that there's journal pins around, or you can just make sure that they're informed and know where to find that. But again, you can see that these have just the names of the locations and different icons depending upon the size of the settlement. You can link these to journal entries like I've done with Raven Bank here, or you can just use them as kind of hover notifications to show what's there. That's perhaps more useful if you don't have these built-in labels like I do from Wonderdraft. And you can do this on like a blank map where you're adding in specific cities there. All of these can be further customized. You can adjust the icon if you'd like to, and you can change the tinting, color, etc. And that brings us to the first point of customization that's going to start taking things up a notch here. We can adjust this icon here, and you can see that there are a variety of icons, and these are all found in your SVG folder if you go into the core data structure and you're looking at icons. And then you can also go to custom, and there is an option right here to open up a custom icon. And here you could do something like, since I'm only using this for information, I can go into, say, the BaileyWiki Maps Towns, and then I can go find the little info active tile here. And now this just looks like an information button, and you can make this less obtrusive in this case. and you can adjust the icon size down to something a little smaller, but you could then use these as little info buttons telling people that, hey, there's a journal entry here. And again, this works well with that idea of keeping it clean and just using the built-in labels for it. Next, we're going to build off of that custom icon idea. And to do that, we're going to head over to cartography assets. If you're not familiar, this site has a bunch of different map making assets for Dungeondraft, Wonderdraft, and a host of other platforms. We're interested in the Wonderdraft assets here. Now, obviously, if you're using Wonderdraft to create your maps, then this is going to be really helpful to you. But even if you're not, this is a great place to go because we can use Wonderdraft packs to create amazing tile sets for FoundryVTT. If you filter your assets by software specific for Wonderdraft, and you just click on the Wonderdraft, it'll give you a variety of assets for some really gorgeous map making pieces. You can filter these down further with tags, license information, etc. And you can see a lot of different options here. Go for a tile set that you enjoy the style of. If you want to keep it consistent with a lot of the things that we're doing, then we recommend Adipik Mazenk. And Adipik, if you're watching this, I apologize if I just butchered your name. A lot of these assets are paid, but there's also a lot of free options. Again, if you are willing to spend the money, then Adipik is a great creator to support. He has a massive library of really awesome stuff, and that's what we'll be using later today. But you can scroll through all of these different pieces, and you can find what speaks to you the most. For example, we've got this ultimate winter and snowy settlements and towns from Adipik. And you can see there's a lot of different assets, and most of the creators are really great about showing you everything that's on there. And most things come in multiple flavors. And whether you're using Wonderdraft or not, again, these are great options for tile sets because unlike Dungeondraft, Wonderdraft assets don't come in a .pack file. So you don't need a separate utility to unpack them. They come in a zip and then you move the direct PNGs into a folder to register that asset pack for Wonderdraft. So for this, it's super easy to get those really gorgeous assets and use them as tiles for yourself in Foundry Virtual Tabletop. Whatever Wonderdraft or other mapping assets you decide to pick up, they'll download in the form of a zip file for you to extract. So go ahead and extract those with your method of choice, whether that's 7-zip or your operating system's default archiving tool. Then we can start drilling down into it. If you're going to install this as an asset pack for Wonderdraft, then you'll want to check out the README. We're not going to cover that in today's tutorial, but let us know if you're interested in a Wonderdraft tutorial, and we can cover adding in custom assets in that tutorial in the future. But when we drill down, we're going to go into sprites, and that's where all of these wonderful symbols are. So if we go into trees and go into the subfolders, we can see we have these different pieces. Now, the ones we're looking for are not the ones that have this white color to them. Those are going to be kind of hard to work with. Even if you tint them, they're not going to work quite right here. So we're looking for things like this. These are single trees, and I'm perhaps more interested in the tree clumps here. And these are going to be much larger. And so you can see this really bright green is actually part of Wonderdraft's version of colorable. The way Wonderdraft does colorability is a little bit different from Dungeondraft, so it doesn't play quite as nicely with token magic effects macros, so we're going to go ahead and ignore those, and these default colors are pretty gorgeous already. So we can see we've got all of these great options here, which are going to make it really easy to add forests and groves to any kind of regional maps that we're customizing in Foundry. So you can take these and you can move these into your Foundry assets directory, however you like to store and organize your pieces. You could do that as is. If you're using a lot of these assets, we highly recommend that you convert these into a .webp format. You can either use something like GIMP or Photoshop. Any kind of photo or image editing software usually has a way to convert it from PNG to WebP, or you can use a bulk utility like XNConvert or something similar to that. Whether you've converted the assets to WebP to save space or you have left them as PNG, however you've organized them, we're going to hop back into Foundry and we're going to play around with those tiles a little bit here. And this is just going to be a quick demonstration. I have put them inside of a assets folder and then a section for maps like this and tiles. And then again, the artist that we're using today is Adipik Mazenk. If you like these tiles, you like this artwork, definitely go check them out and give them your support. It's really great stuff. And there's a massive library here. So we'll drill down into nature, and I have a couple folders here for colorable and that sketch as I was experimenting, but again, I recommend that you just don't bother with that. It's a little hard to get working nicely. And we can scroll through here and we can find all kinds of different assets in here, and we can just take a look at these tree clumps that we brought in earlier. And you can bring them in, and just like any other tile, you can also change the asset grid size to be a different size. So if you use a higher number, then it is going to be really small. And if you use a lower number, it's going to come out much larger. So you can use that to adjust these. I find just dragging them out at the base, and then you can resize them by just holding down this bottom corner. If you hold down Alt when you do that, then you maintain the aspect ratio, and that's really nice. So we can use this for all kinds of things that we can then create brand new kind of landscapes and geography using these tiles. But another application here is if we go back to our map pins here, we can also change these map pins to use a custom icon. So rather than this village, we scroll up to custom and select custom icon. And if I go into structures, this is where I've put all of the different towns and everything. Let's see, this is a pretty small town in the woods, so this seems appropriate. And if we update that map note, you'll notice that you have this nice little custom image, and you can scale up the icon size to use that as kind of a de facto look. Now you have a map note that looks a lot classier than just the standard icons here. So it's got a lot more detail to it, so that's a decent option for you. And of course, we love our automation and our fancy effects, so we're going to show off another version where we use Monk's active tile triggers. So here I have another version of the same map set up, but you'll notice that there are no journal nodes over here, and instead there is a tile. And this tile works on some hover logic, and I've got the option to approach the location, which is going to give the game master an option to activate a new scene. And then we have this new area called Raven Bank, which is kind of drilling down into the city. Returning to the scene, we can also hover over this and then open up a box for the journal entry. So this is a way to add this kind of slick look, and your players won't be able to see these tiles or anything. So they'll be able to just hover over the cities and be able to get a look that way. And of course, you can apply this with, instead of using this hidden artwork, we could then do the same thing with one of the tiles that we've grabbed. And just if we mark that not hidden anymore, then this tile now has the same functionality and gives us that hover and all the options to approach the location, etc. So there's a lot of flexibility with the Monk's active tile triggers, but it might be a little much for some of the automation you want to do. If you want to take a look at how this is set up, this is the very rough overview here on the setup screen. And then going into the actions will slow down for you to be able to see this. I've got some extra landings in here to remind me what to edit in case I copy and paste this. And then it allows me to easily and quickly see what needs to be updated for when I'm copying and pasting from my template. Now this has some logic in here to make sure that multiple players aren't opening up this dialogue and we're not having the scrolling text spam constantly. We're still kind of workshopping the exact mechanics of this, but it works pretty well as is to have this hoverable option that each player can activate individually without stepping on each other's toes. So that is the tile that if you want to replicate, you can go ahead and do that. But again, Monk's active tile triggers, maybe you don't need to be this complicated. Maybe you just want to have a hover over tile that you just click on it to change the scene, or click on it to open the journal entry, or click on it to have the hovering text to tell you what it is, or use it to reveal a drawing that tells the name rather than having this scrolling text. There's a lot of different options. We kind of picked the fanciest showcase here for Monk's active tiles just to show off just how detailed you can get with this. If we take a look at our little regional map again, we'll see that we've got 3 districts drawn up here. And these are just polygon tools or polygon drawings here with the regular drawing tool, and then we've adjusted the line settings and everything. So let's go ahead and show off making one of those really quickly. And I'm not going to really sweat exactly what these lines are for the district. And I'm not actually going to adjust these settings. I'm going to show off an awesome new feature from ADIF with Mass Edit, and that is Mass Edit prefabs. So whenever you use the Mass Edit window, you'll notice that you can change certain things, and you can now create these brushes that when I click on this, I have now changed this into being the red district type of drawing. So I've got a slightly thinner line style, and I've got a fill with a certain opacity. It's already adjusted that, and it's got my text and everything, so we can call this District 04. Now, if I wanted to make a bunch of different presets for districts, I could also then go through and set up all of these with different colors. So in this case, we'll go ahead and adjust all of the color schemes here. If you're ever working with this and the fill color isn't wanting to update, sometimes that's because of this opacity, even if you update the drawing. And so the way you can fix that is just if you change the opacity back and forth. And this occurs sometimes with the solid fills if you're changing colors, and also with pattern fills. So just if that ever happens, that is a little tip for you, that you can just adjust the opacity back and forth and you'll be good to go. We'll go ahead and finish adding all of these little bits. And now we've got this green district. So how do we create one of these Mass Edit prefabs? Well, if I have this selected and I use my Mass Edit hotkey to open up the menu, and by default that's Shift E, we've got all of these different options. I'm not worried about the position at all. I'm going to go ahead and right click on the lines, and you'll notice that checks every single box that I'm using over here. Right click on fill. Likewise, it's going to go ahead and select everything. If you want, you can leave the whole fill texture unchecked, because if for whatever reason you did want to switch to a texture or something like that and you've already got texture data, then you don't necessarily want to overwrite that. And since we're using the solid, it's not going to interfere with setting up the drawing this way. Then we've got the text, and I'm going to go ahead and right click text as well, but I'm going to uncheck the text label up here at the top. And if I'm doing anything with my font family or something like that, and I have a specific size font or any other settings in here, then I can also pass those along so it's nice and consistent. Rather than hitting apply, I'm going to click on this little box up here. It looks like a small cardboard box that you'd use for moving. If you click on that, it's going to open up your presets window that I pulled out earlier. Then you're going to have the option to create a preset. And it's going to create a new preset down here, and we can call this District Green 01. And then I'm using -ADT, and I'll show you why in just a moment. You can then organize these into folders, like I have the mapping ADT folder right here. And now if I were to select this brush by just clicking on the Activate Brush, I can then apply it to other districts. And I can switch back and forth between them seamlessly. So this is a pretty powerful effect that we're going to leverage a lot more in just a moment. So I mentioned ADT earlier, and that's because we found another really fun module to mess around with when we're doing a lot of things with drawings. And that's called the Advanced Drawing Tools module from Dev 7355608, or EBER. And if we turn that on, we'll go ahead and see just what all that changes. All right, and now we're back, and you'll notice that these district lines look a little bit different. If we go into our drawing configurations under lines, we now have options for dashes to set how large the dash is in pixels and then how much of a gap between them as well. And then in fill, we have all kinds of settings for changing the texture up. And in text, we have a whole lot more options. So in these examples, I didn't alter anything with the extra settings on the text other than just the size and the color and everything, but we'll show off how some of that works here in just a moment. But there's a lot of powerful tools in Advanced Drawing Tools. Again, not strictly necessary for doing this project, but it can create some really cool results when you're combining the Advanced Drawing Tools effects with the Mass Edit presets. It allows you to have some really complex drawings that might take you a little bit to figure out exactly the style you want, but it's really easily replicable after that. You don't have to copy and paste, and you don't have to adjust everything. And speaking of adjusting, another awesome feature of Advanced Drawing Tools is you can see how this kind of bubbles out a little bit. If I right click this, there's now this option for edit, and I can move my points around, kind of similar to adjusting things on like a path in Dungeon Draft or a pattern shape. And I can use that to fine tune my shapes. on any of these polygons I draw. So that's another really great feature here, and it makes creating things like this district map, or if you're using freehand drawings, then it makes them a lot easier to work with and really powerful. You'll also notice that this district has the dots, and that was kind of our source. All of these districts had dots to begin with, the dash. And even though I didn't have advanced drawing tools open at the time, when I created this mass edit prefab for my districts, then it actually had all of the flags for the dashes and everything for advanced drawing tools stored inside of it. So that was still getting copied over, even though I didn't have the module active. So you don't have to stress about like, oh no, did I make that preset with the right modules active or not? And now, speaking of modules, let's open up another one, and this is going to be Monk's Enhanced Journal. You might already have that, and so you might already be experiencing a few different options here. And we're actually going to use Monk's Enhanced Journal for kind of an interesting feature. But if we go ahead and save our module settings and we reload, we're less interested in the journals themselves and actually a little more interested in what it can do for our drawings. And we'll notice we have the District 04 over here, and this is that original white setup that we had. And we'll notice that the text over here is a new font, Dungeon Dropcase. And there are a lot of different fonts that come bundled with Foundry to begin with, but Monk's Enhanced Journals adds extra stuff like Lover's Quarrel and that Dungeon Dropcase that I just love. So if you want some extra fonts, look into modules that add this as well, because you can then use those fonts for creating your drawings, and it makes really cool looking maps and map labels. And again, I'm just such a huge fan of the Dungeon Dropcase here. If you wanted to add more fonts on your own, you can go into your configure settings, and in core, there is actually a configure additional fonts. We're not going to go into a whole tutorial on this, but basically you can put in font files and have a directory for that for you, or you can use system, and basically you can add any font that is on your operating system. So anything that's in the Windows system folders in the fonts, you can just type in the name of that and add it in, and you'll add additional fonts. So that's a really brief overview on that. Let us know if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. Now that we've explored a lot of the tools for creating map elements, let's go ahead and put in that last piece of the puzzle here. If we go to the Neverwinter map, then you'll see what I'm talking about. So first, this seems like just a regular tile that doesn't have anything special with it. But if we open this up, you'll notice that this is linking to the Bailiwick Maps Towns module. It's actually a black square. So this has a token magic effects filter applied to it. If you've seen our endless terrain macros that let you generate a bunch of different terrains, this is that, but made a little bit more precise and a little less random. And with that, you can use the scrolling token magic effects macro to then pan around on the map, and you can use a much larger file. And for example, if we had the full version of this map, or if we wanted to zoom in on Illyria, we could make separate region maps using the same source map and then zoom in as much as we wanted on this. You can even do things like rotate. And if you wanted to, you could make it scroll, or you could use that until you found the right spot and then pause it to line things up. So that is a really cool application with token magic effects. So if we pull open the macros here, we're going to compare the random overlay for terrain using the desert one and this endless map for Neverwinter here. And there's a few key differences and some really big similarities. This may look like there is a ton different here, but there's actually not that much going on. So first we've got the regular filter setups here, and then we have randomized, and that's going to be true, and that's how we're going to alternate images in the case of the desert terrain. But we also have things for scale and rotation and translation. And so over here in the endless map for Neverwinter, I want this to always start with the exact same starting position, because this map is kind of tall and skinny and has an awkward kind of aspect ratio to it. And so I want to always just start in the middle, and then I'll move around from there. So I have only put one image in this image path section, which over here is all of this. So we have trimmed it down to just a single asset here, and it's always going to be there. And then the scale option is basically the zoom function. So we're going to zoom in 2.5 times on this. And I have both of these set to 2.5. So it's going to always be the exact same level of zoom as well. if you have different values for this, it'll randomize it, and then you can adjust the step for how random it will be or how granular you can get there. And we're linking it to the Y scale, so you're zooming it in at the same aspect ratio. And then down at the bottom is basically just your control to make sure that the image is centered and everything. So you can check out the random overlay macros in the BaileyWiki nuts and bolts module, and then you can kind of reverse engineer them here. And then also in the BaileyWiki nuts and bolts module is that scrolling token magic effects macro. And just to show you what I was talking about with those edges, if I was randomizing the location that we start in, then we might end up with these seams, and that's not fun. It's also worth noting with this zoom and pan and rotate, you can think of it as if you are moving the map itself as if it is on a table rather than moving your view. And so that's why this might seem almost inverted. Like if I'm hitting up, it appears like we're looking further south or moving further south on the map rather than moving north. And that's because it's like we're sliding the map up and away from us. So we discussed how you could use the same art to create basically two levels of maps, and so let's demonstrate that with the Illyria map that we have set up. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Place Tile, and I'm going to use that to drag out this whole big box here, because it doesn't really matter what the artwork is, because we're going to go into the modules, and I'm going to grab this from the Towns module. Inside of the Active Tiles folder, we've got a black square. You can use really any image, it just needs to be completely opaque. So I highly recommend you either use the black square from our Active Tiles or make your own little black square and use that when you're doing these things. And once you've created the tile, it looks pretty bland now, but we're going to use a macro, and this is pretty much exactly the same as the macro that we use for Neverwinter. It's just going to be referencing that Illyria map, which is the name of the continent from earlier. If we do that, it takes a minute because it's a pretty large file and we're zoomed in here. And so now we can use those scrolling token magic effects tools, and we can then zoom in further. So if I wanted to have a zoomed in area of the region around Raven Bank, since that's kind of the city that we have a smaller district map of, we can just zoom in and then we can pan around and decide where we want this to be. And then bam, you've got a great little region map. And you can add in things like those journal notes or additional tiles if you wanted to add further interest here. So that's a pretty great application of being able to use existing maps that have labels to them and giving you multiple levels of detail without having to make multiple maps. It saves you a lot of time, at least in the Wonderdraft side of things, if you're making your own map. I didn't have to make another map that is just this region and then another one that is Raven Bank zoomed in. I could just zoom in using token magic effects, which is a really awesome way to build out multiple levels of this and create multiple levels of zoom. You could even set up macros that this starts at the full size of Illyria and then zooms in when people click on things. So there's a lot of cool applications here. But we're not quite done yet. Let's go ahead and take a look at this empty scene that I've created. And once again, we're going to go to this place tile, and we're going to drag this out. Yeah, and then we're going to go ahead and grab our black square once again, and create our tile. And now I have set up a extra filter here. And so this is also going to be picking just one piece here, but I have edited this a bit. And you'll notice this one has no symbols on it or anything, or no markings for towns and everything. And so this is how you can really quickly actually use some general maps that don't have geography or major cities labeled on them and everything, and you can use them to create your own cities. And so what we can do here is we can go into those tiles that we'd gotten before. If we go to our maps and our tiles, and if I want to plop a city right here, I can then drop that in. And now I have a city. I can set that up with Monk's Active Tiles. I can add a journal note. I can add drawings for labels. And there's all kinds of really cool things that you can do. So I've drawn out that text, and I'll show you, I've been pretty busy with all of these different presets. So if I wanted to apply a label here, we'll notice that we've now got this really great label format for this city. And this is leveraging a lot of different things right here. So with this city name, we're using that mass edit prefab to basically bring this in. We've got a custom font from Monk's Enhanced Journals. And then we've got in our lines, we're using advanced drawing tools to set up this dash that has its own kind of style to it. And we have set up different colors. And then the fill, we're actually using a pattern. I am using some textures that I picked up. These are, free textures that are tileable and, completely seamless. And they make nice little backgrounds to this so that you can still move this around and it'll cover up the symbols on the map really nicely. So I think it works well compared to just using a kind of light background on them. So that's my preference. You can adjust the fill opacity, but it doesn't play super nicely with your textures. And then in text-wise, you can get really crazy with advanced drawing tools. It's pretty nice. So I am able to adjust this stroke color, and that's what's on the letters here. So if I change the stroke color, just make it bright red to drive home the point. And you can see that really can change the look of things, and it can give you this cool effect for either really controlling the contrast of these pieces or adding just this nice visual effect to it. And there's also a drop shadow blur that we can adjust here. Because you'll notice that if I were to draw a drawing out here with Foundry, this is just my default settings. You'll notice that in Foundry, by default, you've always got this automatic stroke that's going around the edges of the word. And then you also always have a drop shadow beneath it. And you can't change the colors of it. Normally, you can't change the stroke. You can't change the weighting of the stroke. You can't change the weighting of the drop shadow. But with advanced drawing tools, you can configure all of that and make some really awesome labels for different things and create a lot of different effects. So now let's take a look at a really big case study here that I've made. I've done the same thing, but I made a blank map, so it has actually no items here. And this map was completely made in Foundry using a blank map I made in Wonderdraft. I just used a continent generator, and then I said that was good, and I exported it. And then I put that into the Token Magic Effects filter to create this backdrop. And now I have placed all of these different tiles from Adipic again. And then I have made a whole mess of different presets using Mass Edit and Advanced Drawing tools. So a couple of features to point out here. You'll notice that I've got this really crazy looking label here for this city called Kerwell. And I don't have any lines going on here. And how I'm able to achieve this cool border is I've actually gone in here and I've used a pattern fill. My fill texture is from one of the UI elements from the landing pages module. And one of the really cool things about advanced drawing tools is when you're doing these pattern fills, you can actually do things like adjust the texture scales. So I'll just adjust that to demonstrate. And you can use that to kind of manipulate different textures, and you can rotate them. For example, I can make this 30 degrees, and you can get these interesting effects. And I was able to use that to basically make a really fancy frame around my city label. Is that kind of tinkering for everyone, and is it super easy to do? No, not necessarily, but it's a really cool demonstration of the power that you've got here. And you could use something similar if you have those more seamless textures and you just want to break things up a little bit, change the rotation, offset it a little bit, maybe make it look a little smaller between different options. And then text-wise, we have actually the option to create gradients with our colors using advanced drawing tools too. So that's how we have this kind of brighter yellow down into a deeper gold effect going on. And you can add as much of that as you want. And so we have this really cool effect here, and then we have all of these different labels here. So let's go ahead and get into a demonstration of how would you leverage all of this together. So first, let's go ahead and use our tile browser, and we'll go back to those tiles that we have from Adipic here. Now let's go ahead and add a small town down here, huh? I think I like this. So we'll go ahead and drop this in. We can even add a couple just to hit home that it's a town and not a singular building out in the middle of nowhere. And remember that our background is a tile, so you may want to avoid using the send to back options on your tiles. So we've made this little town here. And now we need to have a road that goes here. So the best way to do that is if you use this freehand tool, you can draw a nice little path. And one thing to note is that with Foundry, the different assets have different levels to them, just innately. They're always going to have a certain hierarchy if all else is equal. So if they're all at the exact same elevation, for example, if you're using levels, then drawings are always going to be above tiles. So as a demonstration, if I use this to edit my points and I drag this point way out here, you'll see that that line cuts through my village. So you can be precise with it. And that's again where advanced drawing tools is really helpful, because I can then, just like I pulled this out to make it a little ridiculous, I can put it right back using that edit option on this drawing. So we've drawn this path in. We'll then also probably want to go ahead and raise up this label so that we're not getting it obstructed. And let's even name this road. And we've named the road. Obviously, it doesn't look anything like either our major roads or our minor roads, but again, we've got this nice preset that we already established. So we'll go ahead and let's make it a major road. If I go ahead and click on it, then it's automatically applied the color, the opacity, the thickness of the line, and adjusted the text. So this is a really easy way to build out your roads super fast. This was really easy to do here. You just have to get the right style down once, and then it's infinitely repeatable with those little freehand motions. And now let's do the same thing with the text label. All right, we'll just name this place Protocol because I'm not feeling overly creative at the moment. And I've got a label set up for towns here, and I'm just going to open up my presets again, and I'm just going to use that active brush, and bam, we have applied this different effect. So now we have this great drawing. One thing to note is that if your drawing is like super small with advanced drawing tools, then it's going to support text wrapping and it's going to start popping out. So if that's really small, it can be hard to grab a hold of this properly to then resize it. So you'll see that I have a hard time grabbing it to resize it. So if that happens, you might need to just Control X, so cut, and then resize it, and just make it a lot bigger than what you need it to be. And then you can update the drawing, and then you can resize it to be the appropriate size and plop it right in. And so now we have this nice label here. And you'll see that we've got a couple other kinds of labels going on around here. So let's name these mountains too. And with that mass edit preset, I have a kind of tan look for it. And I have this nice label generated. And again, you'll notice that with advanced drawing tools, you can have text wrapping. So we can leave this like so. And you get this pretty nice effect going on right here. You can also do some other pretty cool things, like over here, we actually have this Beacon Mond wood is set up with an arc to it, which makes it a little counterintuitive to actually select the correct drawing box for it, but you get the hang of it once you've messed around with it a bit. And we can set this arc of -30 degrees, and then it will bend kind of down like a smile, or we can make it go up, and you can get it pretty extreme here. So there's a lot of different options here, and it makes it really easy to add in these bits and pieces. And when you've got more of these completed and you want to add some extra embellishments, then there's also things like adding in these symbol options. Maybe you're going to use this as kind of a windrose type of situation, or you can add things like ships in the ocean. Just like when you look at old maps, there's extra symbols here and there, and you can do the same thing here. Kind of stylize the map, if you will. And there's a lot of different options that you can do if you explore what is out there in terms of Wonderdraft assets and just play around with things like advanced drawing tools, like the vanilla drawing tools. You can still get some really awesome effects, like having these backgrounds and having just interesting choices of the font that you pick from the vanilla fonts, and the colors that you're using, and you can still get really cool, distinct labels and create really nice effects with the roads and all of the different geographies that you'll have with your map. And again, this is just a blank map that I generated a few times. So to demonstrate that, again, really quick, this is my blank map that I'm going to use. And just like we did over here, if we just generate it a few times, we can figure out a landmass that we like, or we can fine tune it and go to different parts of the continent and then work with it from there. And then you can just start building your map directly in Foundry. And all you had to do was get a single blank map. And that blank map can be one that you made in Wonderdraft. It can be one from Reddit. It can be one from Pinterest, wherever you want to grab it from. It can be one from a module. And you can create a really awesome and compelling area by just adding in some of these great assets. And again, we love these from Adepik Mazank, and they're well worth the support if you are interested. And if you are just looking around for other Wonderdraft assets, there are quite a bit of free options that you can throw in to really spice up your ability to make these really interesting regional and continental level maps for your games. I'm going to conclude our tour of different regional and continental map making options in Foundry with this sped up version of me assembling this map in the background completely in Foundry. I hope that this video has been as interesting to you as it was interesting for us to explore all of these different techniques. We think there's a lot of potential in using the mass edit presets in particular, not just for things like these regional maps, but also for other applications, such as setting up our lights faster in 2D scenes, or assembling Monk's Active Tile Trigger ready tiles in an instant. There's a lot of possibilities there, and it seems like a really powerful tool that ADIF has now added to our arsenal. Advanced Drawing Tools also adds a wonderful array of options to an otherwise somewhat limited drawing tool palette. The drawing tool in Vanilla Foundry is quite serviceable for making rudimentary labels or making notes for yourself, but when it comes to actually drawing things and illustrating ideas or differentiating labels, it's maybe a little lacking. The ADT module really fleshes that out and brings a lot to the table. And of course, we're still continued to be amazed by token magic effects and the sprite abilities in order to create these maps, like the endless terrain, but now we can be even more powerful with them by using them to reuse a single map to create multiple levels of detail. These are all really interesting things to us, but we want to know from you, what of these techniques makes sense to you in terms of something you'd like to incorporate into your own GM prep workflow? And what kind of features would you like to see us support? Do you want to see more fonts added to our modules? Do you want to see more macros and source maps for creating your own regional maps? Do you want to see us bundle tiles for creating things like these cities and map making icons? Once again, this has been Zephyr with the BaileyWiki channel. If you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content, and consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you also gain access to all of the modular systems and scenes that we've ever made. And be sure to let us know in the comments what other features we should be adding to those modules right now. Again, it's been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching, happy gaming, and have a good one.